Hi, my name is Catherine, and welcome to my channel where we talk about books you should read instead of stuff you should buy. And sometimes that includes books you maybe shouldn't read, but that's up to you to decide. Today, we're going to dig into the concept of enshittification, a term popularized by tech journalist Cory Doctorow, and the moral panic around social media addiction pushed by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. Because I don't know about you, but my feed is filled with people quitting social media and going analog, and replacing their smartphone with a dumb phone, and just overall complaining about social media being a toxic hellscape. People are clearly fed up with these apps, but I will argue that this frustration is misplaced. You don't hate social media. What you actually hate is capitalism. I recently picked up Cory Doctorow's book, Enshittification: Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It. It started off really strong, and I got a lot out of the first half, but then it turned into a snooze fest, and I DNF'd it. I would put this book in the should have been a blog post category. Like many books in this category, it originally was a blog post that went viral because it was a really good blog post. In these cases, due to the initial success of their blog posts, the author is offered a book deal to expand on those ideas, and when there's a lot to expand on, it works out well. But when there's not, it just feels like they're trying to fill space. If you're a tech policy nerd, you might disagree with my assessment of this book, and that's fine. If you think it's worth finishing, sound off in the comments. Anyway, enshittification, also known as platform decay, is a process in which two-sided online products and services decline in quality over time. Initially, vendors create high-quality offerings to attract users, and then they degrade those offerings to better serve businesses, and finally, degrade their services to both users and businesses to maximize short-term profits for shareholders. Enshittification applies to many platforms, including Uber and Amazon, but most notably social media platforms. In his work, Doctorow uses Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok as case studies for this phenomenon. Examples of enshittification include declining search quality, aggressive advertising, diminished creator reach, and AI slop content. This shit is so widespread that enshittification was the word of the year in 2023. It's nice to have a name for something we've all been experiencing. I deleted my Facebook account years ago, and it was bad enough then, but that was before it had become completely enshittified. I never used Twitter, but I've listened to numerous accounts of its enshittification, especially after Elon took over. I also never joined TikTok because I knew it was just another time suck that I didn't need in my life. I guess you could say I'm a digital minimalist. Inspired by Cal Newport years ago, I decided that the only social media platforms that added net value to my life were Instagram and YouTube. And sadly, I've witnessed the ways they've become enshittified since then. I avoid some of this shit by paying for YouTube Premium. Apparently, you can pay to not see ads on Instagram too, but I simply refuse to give Meta my money. Google isn't much better, but the thought of going back to watching YouTube ads on top of the sponsored ads from creators makes me want to blow my fucking brains out. Call me dramatic, but I fucking hate ads. No judgment towards creators who have to take sponsorships to make a living. I get it. I mean, it depends on the sponsorship. But you will not be seeing any sponsorships on this channel, aside from the occasional Patreon plug. As a test, I just opened the Instagram app and started a stopwatch, and guess how long it took before I saw an ad? "7 seconds. Fucking kill me, I'm so done with this bullshit." You may be thinking, just delete your Instagram account. But one of the key features of enshittification is that these platforms lock users in by creating high switching costs. Sure, you're free to leave the platform, and some of your friends or followers will follow you to another platform, but most won't. So the cost of switching is losing contact with people and losing money if you're a creator. The value that originally drew people to these apps is still there, and you can't really get it elsewhere, so you're forced to just wade through the shit. I don't want to delete my Instagram account because I value keeping up with friends, watching funny reels, sharing posts, and communicating with other creators. And I don't want to pay for a Meta subscription, so I simply have to deal with being bombarded with ads. It goes without saying that capitalism drives the enshittification process. Referring back to the definition, the goal is to maximize short-term profits for shareholders. But it's not just incessant ads and AI slop that is leading people to the conclusion that social media is a toxic hellscape. There's also the narrative that it's addictive and driving up rates of anxiety and depression, particularly among children and young adults. Like many people, I bought into this narrative. When I developed a crippling panic disorder in 2020, I attributed my anxiety in part to my decade-long social media addiction. And that brings us to the New York Times bestseller, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. This is a book you probably shouldn't read because it's garbage. To be transparent, I'm basing this off reviews from people I trust. I didn't waste my time reading this one. But before you say, you can't dismiss it if you didn't even read it, stop right there. Yes, I can. You don't have to read the book of Genesis to conclude that creationism is bullshit. No hate to my progressive Christians out there. Love y'all. But to those who insist that one must read the Bible cover to cover before they can dismiss it, have you read the Book of Mormon? No? Didn't think so. So let me critique Jonathan Haidt having not read his shitty book. Thank you. Funny backstory, this book was actually on my TBR list, and my husband was like, that book is bullshit, and explained that there's no actual evidence that social media causes anxiety and depression. And I was like, what do you mean? Of course it does. We got into an argument about it, and I got super defensive and pissed when I started losing the argument, because he was pulling up scientific studies that supported his claim, and I had nothing but anecdotal evidence and common sense. Let me just state for the record that my bias going into all of this was to prove my husband wrong, and to have a more simplified explanation as to why I was so fucking anxious. I'm also somewhat of a Luddite. Like, I tend to be wary of new technology and see the cons before seeing the pros. So while I rationally reject technophobia, it is my instinctual attitude. And lastly, I hate tech billionaires just as much as the next person, so in no way am I trying to defend Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk here. Okay, disclaimers out of the way. Haidt argues that smartphones and social media, alongside helicopter parenting, which keeps kids inside on these devices, have caused a great rewiring of children's brains, resulting in a rise in mental illness. But the data he cites only shows a correlation, not causation. Psychology professors Candace Odgers and Christopher Ferguson from the University of California, Irvine and Stetson University have accused Haidt of making sweeping, unsubstantiated claims and fomenting a moral panic. Odgers cites her own review of 40 studies published in 2020, finding no causal link between smartphone or social media usage and poor mental health among adolescents, as well as several other meta-analyses and systematic reviews. Ferguson says Haidt's moral panic about social media is reminiscent of the debate about video games causing real-world violence. He co-authored a 2021 meta-analysis of more than 30 studies that found no link between smartphone or social media use and poor mental health outcomes. Some of these studies suggest that reverse causation is at play. Anxiety and depression increase screen time and social comparison, rather than the other way around. In other words, bedrotting and doom scrolling are a symptom of mental illness, rather than the cause of mental illness. And your mental state affects how you interpret what you see on social media. In a positive mental state, seeing others' highlight reels may bring you joy or inspiration, while in a negative mental state, it may elicit feelings of envy or insecurity. One study conducted across 72 countries found a positive effect on well-being. And yes, I checked for conflicts of interest, and none were found. Not only is there no evidence to support Haidt's claims, there's also a danger in misdiagnosing the problem. By oversimplifying a complex issue and pinning the blame on smartphones and social media, we fail to address the actual problem. Haidt offers band-aid solutions, some of which have the potential to backfire. For example, he supports age verification laws, which pose major privacy and data security threats. He also recommends keeping children from accessing social media until they're 16, an arbitrary age, without acknowledging the benefits of social media and the harms caused by completely restricting kids' access to these platforms. Because of the media's negativity bias, we often hear about the harms of social media, so we forget about or take for granted the many benefits of social media, like staying connected with people we've met in real life, but also connecting with people from all over the world with shared interests and values. This is especially beneficial for marginalized people, as real life can be isolating, and social media allows them to find community with others who share their struggle. Not only does Haidt fail to acknowledge this major benefit to LGBT youth, for example, he gives credence to the idea that higher rates of gender dysphoria among children is the result of a social contagion, rather than increased awareness and reporting. The social contagion theory, aka rapid onset gender dysphoria, is right-wing nonsense that's been debunked, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Social media is invaluable to social movements for organizing and spreading awareness. It's an outlet for self-expression and creativity. It's also a tool for learning new skills and sharing information. Without social media, I would have never learned about RCPD and gotten treatment for it. If you're not familiar, which you probably aren't, RCPD is the inability to burp, and it sucks. But literally thanks to Reddit, there's now a cure. I'm not even joking, y'all. Look into it. Of course, there are negative effects of staring at screens all day, but this is largely due to the opportunity cost. If you're inside scrolling on your phone all day, you're probably not getting enough exercise or sunlight. And if social media takes up several hours of your day, you're probably neglecting other responsibilities or activities that improve cognitive function, like reading, writing, or meditating. But this is true for any activity. Moderation and balance is crucial. An oft-cited harm of social media is the negative impact on our attention spans. None of the studies I cited on mental health and social media use measured attention spans, but I did find a few studies suggesting a link. However, this decrease in cognitive function and focus seems to be caused by specific social media features, rather than social media itself. For example, distracting notifications and alerts, incessant ad breaks, and platforms pushing short-form content over long-form content. I think there's a time and place for short-form content, but YouTube rolling out shorts pissed me the fuck off. Like, if I want to watch shorts, I can go on Instagram. And the fact that you can't block them from your feed is infuriating. They do all these things because it's more profitable. The problem isn't social media, it's capitalism. Another frequently raised concern about social media is the social comparison aspect. People are comparing their lives to other people's highlight reels, and they're developing body image issues as a result of seeing so many edited, posed pictures of beautiful people with perfect bodies. But the claim that social media is the cause of low self-esteem is not supported by the data. Social comparison and body image issues existed long before social media. Insecurity is profitable. Again, the problem isn't social media, it's capitalism. And arguably, social media has had a positive impact in this regard. In the 90s, our content diet was TV, movies, books, and magazines. Now, interspersed with that, we're consuming content created by regular people. Yes, there's a lot of overly curated content out there that promotes an unattainable beauty standard or lifestyle, but a lot of popular content is popular because it's authentic and relatable. The body positivity movement exploded in the era of social media, and we've come a long way since the 90s and early 2000s. As for the addictive nature of social media, it's true that tech companies deploy strategies to keep us scrolling and exploit our attention for money. However, it's the exploiting our attention for money part that's nefarious, not the trying to hook us part. Anyone trying to educate or entertain you is trying to grab your attention and keep you engaged. A good book will do that. A good TV show will do that. Are writers evil for writing cliffhangers? I want you to watch this entire video, subscribe, and watch my other videos. Is that wrong? I recently lost an entire night's sleep reading an Abby Jimenez novel. I personally find her books very addictive. Should I sue her publisher for damages? No, that would be ridiculous. It is ultimately my responsibility to pull myself away from whatever content has hooked me and attend to my other responsibilities. Taylor Lorenz, a tech journalist and staunch critic of Jonathan Haidt, adds some very important context to this discussion by looking at moral panics of the past.
Being able to recognize the moral panic about smartphones and social media use that Haidt and much of the mainstream media is pushing is perhaps best accomplished by examining the moral panics of decades past. The truth is that this entire freakout about cell phones and TikTok isn't new. In fact, every single time we've been faced with a new form of media or technology, there is a corresponding movement pushed by the media, academics, and concerned parents declaring that it is destroying young people's mental health and specifically young women's minds, making them anxious, antisocial, depressed, and fundamentally unable to function in the world. Each time technology and media evolve, pundits will argue that this new technology or media is fundamentally different. Back in the 1800s, when printing became cheap, there was a nationwide panic that young people were reading too many novels. Academics and media of the time claimed that reading too many novels could turn children into violent psychopaths or lead them into lives of lust. Many of the arguments against allowing young people to read novels are nearly word for word the arguments used today against social media and TikTok. Leaders of the time argued that, quote, obsessive novel reading occupied too much of children's time and made young people developmentally unbalanced. These kids weren't going outside or hanging with friends. Novels were turning children's minds into pudding. In one 1835 essay titled Devouring Books, the author argues that young people were being turned into thoughtless zombies by becoming addicted to novel reading. One article from 1909 recommends setting time limits on reading. Psychiatrists and doctors claim that too much reading was especially especially destroying young women's minds. In one 1910 article, the author declares that, quote, the effect of excessive novel reading on the married women is responsible for 9/10 of divorce. When newspapers became widely distributed in the US, people argued that children should be shielded from them. Some people sought to institute age limits on reading the news, lest young people learn too much about the world around them for their young age. In 1927, the media claimed that jazz books were leading to an uptick in youth. One senator claimed that too much reading of jazz books was leading to, quote, boys and girls with underdeveloped, lopsided minds. By the 1950s, young people had moved on from reading novels to comic books, and the cycle began again. One 1948 article claimed that comic books were leading to psychiatric conditions among young people, causing them to commit crimes. It's notable that these moral panics are always pushed forward by academics, pundits, and concerned suburban white parents. For instance, in the late 1940s, a psychiatrist and author named Frederick Wortham was treating juvenile delinquents when he noticed that many of those that he treated often read comic books. He quickly declared that comic book readers were aggressive and crime prone, and that these comics were poisoning the minds of American youth. People ate these theories up. Lawmakers discussed comic book bans. Parents were freaking out. And there was this widespread belief that comic books had destroyed the minds of American youth. This backlash became so heated that there was even a public comic book burning in Missouri. A troop of Girl Scouts collected comics and held a mock trial for comic books, declaring the books guilty of leading young people astray and building up false conceptions in their minds, leading to mental health issues. In Vancouver, Canada, nearly 8,000 comic books were set on fire by an organization focused on what? Child safety. Wortham was the Jonathan Haidt of his time. He published a massively popular book in 1954 called The Seduction of the Innocent, which was full of bad research studies, misrepresented claims such as that Batman and Robin were gay, and claimed that comic books were destroying and disrupting a natural childhood.
She goes on, detailing the ensuing moral panics over TVs, beepers, home computers, and video games. You get the idea. While liberals and leftists can get swept up by these moral panics, conservatives push them as a means to keep kids from accessing information so that they can control their information diet and indoctrinate them. Anyway, there's nothing wrong with tech companies wanting to keep people engaged on their platforms. What's actually nefarious is that they're harvesting your data to shove ads down your throat and sell you shit you don't need, worsening the user experience in the pursuit of short-term profits. Overuse of smartphones and social media is clearly a problem for some people. However, a study conducted by researchers at Caltech suggests that social media addiction is largely overstated, and that the addiction framework is inaccurate and unhelpful when it comes to overuse of social media. While a small minority of the population fit the criteria for addiction, the majority of heavy users have simply developed a bad habit. This distinction is important because solutions to treating an addiction and breaking a habit are different. An addiction is more extreme than a bad habit, so this leads people to take more extreme positions on tech policies, such as supporting the Kids Online Safety Act, which is a Trojan horse for surveillance and censorship. And extreme measures like quitting social media altogether or sending kids to social media rehab, which again does not actually fix the problem, as excessive screen time is a symptom rather than the cause of depression and anxiety. There's this widespread sentiment that we'd all be better off if we went back to dumb phones, and this is an incredibly reactionary impulse. Technology is progress. Technology has not corrupted our society. Capitalism has. We don't need to return to the good old days before evil tech. We need to seize the means of production and harness technology to serve the needs and desires of society as a whole, rather than a few greedy tech billionaires. In a socialist society, we could implement rational and humane tech policies that give social media users back a sense of control. We could enjoy the good aspects of social media while minimizing the bad. Social media is a reflection of society as a whole. It's only a toxic hellscape because of capitalism. Capitalism affects every aspect of our lives, including social media. There's nothing inherently wrong with social media, i.e. digital platforms that allow us to connect with people from all around the world and share art, music, and ideas. But there is something inherently wrong with capitalism. Inherent to capitalism is the authoritarian employer-employee relationship, the profit motive, and the imperative to grow indefinitely. This has led to many of the problems we see today, including enshittification, the cost of living crisis, and the climate crisis. And living under these conditions is a much more valid explanation for rising rates of anxiety and depression than social media. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, and let me know if I should make this a series. All right, peace out.